Josan, this is a short video lecture for Metaphysics, RELI 3087 at Hong Kong Baptist University for semester 1 of 2019 through 2020. And this is for week 11, where we're supposed to be talking about supervenience. Now, I just recorded the short video lecture for free will. I felt like doing that one first for week 12, and it turned out to be longer than I was hoping. I think it's still shorter than a 2-hour lecture on that particular Friday would have been, but I'm going to see if I can do this one a little more quickly. Supervenience. What the heck is supervenience? Well, a rough definition is supervenience means one-way dependence. In other words, something depends on something else, but not vice versa. Or supervenience can mean this: X supervenes on Y if X depends entirely on Y. Or it means X supervenes on Y if there's no change in X possible without a change in Y. Now, supervenience is a concept employed in various areas of philosophy. I believe some of the early uses of the term were actually about ethics, about moral qualities supervening on other qualities or something. Our main interest is philosophy of mind. Does the mind supervene on the brain? Now, all reductionist theories are supervenience theories, but not vice versa. The materialist theories, I think, are all going to be supervenience theories. Reductionist theories are all supervenience theories, but not all materialisms are reductionisms. All reductionisms are materialism. The whole point of talking about supervenience is that some philosophers have attempted to be materialist without being reductionist. To say all is matter, matter entirely explains consciousness, but not take the step that seems natural, perhaps obvious, of saying that all physical things are, all mental things are physical things. To say that all mind is brain, all mental properties are physical properties. So when we talk about things we've been talking about, like Nagel, early Jackson, we've been talking about things like phenomenal qualia, and what is it like to be a bat? If there is a particular quality of experience that, as Nagel describes it, is a subjective quality of experience, or a qualia like the experience of seeing the color red that cannot be fully explained in materialistic terms, then it seems that it's very difficult to say that mind reduces to matter. But some people are committed materialist and want to do both of these things, and that's why we talk about supervenience, although technically all reductionisms are also supervenient. So our goal today is to get some rough understanding of this idea of having supervenience without reduction, and look at one or two issues that come up. First, and if you don't already know this, I'm going through the notes that are linked from Moodle, the Google document notes, and section 2 of the notes is some of the issues concerning supervenience. So let's talk about some of the issues concerning supervenience. First issue is emergence. Emergence is an alternative term, and it's a term for a very closely related concept. Roughly, emergence is this: property X emerges from a set of properties Y if X comes from Y, yet X is not one of Y. Or, to make it a little more comprehensible, if your brain shuts down when we use these X and Y terms, mental properties emerge from physical properties if mental properties come from physical properties but are not the same as physical. Or mind emerges from brain if the mind is not the same thing as the brain, but it comes from the brain. It emerges from the brain, but is not the same thing as the brain. The theory of emergence, I think, is best thought of as a version of supervenience, so we're setting it aside. If we had more time, if we could have devoted a whole week to emergence and a whole week to looking at Kim's analysis of supervenience, that might have been useful. We don't have much time. We're setting the term aside. It's probably best thought of as a version of supervenience. It is the theme of, I believe, the penultimate episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. But Star Trek aside, emergence is not that important for our purposes. Another issue concerning supervenience is the issue of local versus global supervenience. Some say the mind supervenes on the brain. Okay, you want to be as specific as you can. Does the mind supervene on the brain alone, or on the brain plus everything else in the world? A brain plus the rest of the body, or a brain plus the rest of the nervous system theory is somewhere in between. You can classify these as local or nearly local. Now you might be thinking, why would we talk about the mind supervening on the entire world? In fact, global supervenience can refer to the entire freaking universe. Why would we talk about my mind supervening, not just on my brain, not just on my brain plus nervous system, not just on my brain plus whole body, but the mind supervening on the brain plus the whole body, plus those trees over there? Does my mind supervene on those trees and on Shatzin Valley? Does my mind supervene on the moon and on some grain of sand on the distant side of Jupiter's moon Io? Well, you might be surprised when clever philosophers go through their arguments about supervenience. This actually comes up. Global versus local supervenience actually is an issue. Now, the biggest issue with supervenience, though, is this question. Incidentally, the arguments I just referred to, let's not touch them for now. They may come up in your reading. I believe you have a reading from Kim. It probably came up. I hope these remarks and the notes will be useful on that, on interpreting the reading. If it's not useful for interpreting the reading, and it's not making much sense to you, you may be able to, like Emergence, just set it aside for our purposes. The biggest issue with supervenience is this question. Does supervenience without reduction make any kind of sense? Now, this is a way some philosophers have tried to handle the mind-body problem. There are some important concerns here. Let's look at those in a bit. So, supervenience without reduction, it's been touted by a number of metaphysicians. Kim, not Ensign Kim from Star Trek Voyager, but Jaegwon Kim, the philosopher. I'm not sure. I think he's Korean American or something. I'm pretty sure he's American. I think he's of Korean background. Anyway, Kim has raised some objections. His article, The Myth of Non-reductive Materialism, is a classic. It's a beautiful piece of metaphysics. I love this article. In presenting the general idea, Kim thinks along these lines. Is the supervenience relation of matter to mind strong enough that there are laws describing how matter affects mind? If there are, how exactly is supervenience supposed to be any different from reductionism? But if there aren't these laws, then is supervenience even a materialism at all? Now, you can formulate this as a constructive dilemma. If mind supervenes on brain, really supervenes on brain, if every mental change depends on physical changes, then we really ought to be able to say that mind reduces to mind reduces to matter, consciousness reduces to matter. But if we can't say that, then why? If we can't say that there are laws describing this, why even say that we're materialists at all, or that every mental change requires physical change if we don't actually have this necessity? So Kim gives a more specific argument in his analysis. His argument involves what we call downward causation, or the influence of the mental on the physical. Example, my mental desire for a cup of tea has the physical effect of me preparing a cup of tea. Or in this case, my mental desire for a cup of tea has the physical effect of this cup of tea moving from over there to over here. Physical events are caused by mental events. This is downward causation, causation of mind to matter. Or, I believe Kim specifically references things people have built, things people have done. Downward causation is a big deal. There's a bit of Shatin Valley. I'm not sure if you can see the buildings from here. There's a lot of buildings around here. The world has been shaped a lot by our minds. The current events in Hong Kong are shaped by mental events. This is downward causation. What is going on with the protests? What is happening with the bricks laid out in the streets? These things happen. These are physical events happening because of mental events, because of ideas that people have. So, downward causation is a big deal. And Kim's argument involves this. The argument will look something like this. Every physical event has a physical cause. mental events cause physical events. So a physical event caused by a mental event has a physical cause. So either it is itself a physical event, or at least it gets its causal power from a physical event. But either way, we might as well just say reductionism is true. So reductionism is true. Let's go through that argument again. The first premise is simply materialism. It's the assumption a materialist makes. Every physical event has a physical cause. Second premise is the theory of downward causation. Mental events cause physical events. Third step in the argument. First, every physical event has a physical cause, materialism. Second, downward causation. Mental events cause physical events. My mind causing the teacup to move over here because I want some. Third step, so a physical event caused by a mental event has a physical cause. This physical event caused by my mental event has a physical cause. And either that mental cause, that mental event causing the physical event is a physical event, or at least it gets all its causal power from a physical event. It's just a link in a chain. And if it's just a link in a chain or itself a physical event, then reductionism is true. So if you begin with the materialistic assumption, you ought to end with reductionism. The idea with Kim is you ought to think clearly. There's that line I've used sometimes. What do I say? I say, philosophy is about seeing things clearly. And a lot of good philosophy is just explaining the obvious. That's what Kant and Reid and Plantinga were trying to do, for example. Anyway, Kim is trying to tell us we ought to see things clearly. If we accept materialism, it's hard to avoid reductionism. And if you're going to avoid reductionism, it's hard to stay with materialism. If you're a reductionist, you end up verging towards something that's not reductionism. If you try to avoid reductionism, you end up veering towards something that's not materialism. You end up veering towards actually dualism or something else. So this argument, you'll observe, involves downward causation. The rough constructive dilemma form argument I gave you earlier is not the only way this can go. That would seem to be, well, it seems that this was how Kim was thinking through things before he went with his main argument. He was trying to get our brains in gear, and then he gave his main argument about downward causation. But the constructive dilemma would seem to be more general. It would say, are there laws that describe how matter affects mind? If so, we ought to be reductionist. If not, we shouldn't even be materialist. This general principle is not actually worked into his specific argument, near as I can tell. His specific argument focuses on downward causation. And if I understand this situation correctly, Kim ended up a supervenience without reduction theorist. He had a theory that physicalism, or something near enough, was the case. The version of supervenience without reduction that he eventually landed on allows us to have a few mental properties that don't actually have any downward causation. There's no physical effect. I believe it was actually qualia, perhaps. Don't quote me on that. I don't have this fresh in my mind. Or maybe I just haven't read that book. In fact, I've not read that book. I believe it was actually called Physicalism or something near enough. But I think maybe it was qualia. Qualia, the experience of seeing red doesn't actually seem to have any effect. It doesn't have downward causation. It doesn't have physical effect. So you can say that this experience of seeing red is entirely dependent on matter, but doesn't cause any physical effects. So his argument doesn't actually apply to it. So you get to have materialism and avoid reductionism on some things. That's, I think, what Kim was thinking. Now, I have in my hard copy of Kim's Myth of Non-Reductive Materialism here this handy outline of it I worked up. I'm going to see if I can hammer out a copy of this outline for you in your notes on Google Docs linked from Moodle. The general idea, again, is that he attempts to stick to materialism and say all is matter, and everything has a physical cause. Every event has a physical cause, and physical alone. There's no non-physical mind involved causing things. the attempt to do this without reductionism, without saying everything is matter, every mental property is a physical property, these attempts tend to fail. They either collapse into eliminativism, denying the existence of said mental events, or they end up being reductionisms, or they fail even to be materialisms at all, or physicalisms. So section 1, section 2, section 4, these things go over this, but I'm going to give you an outline that helps you keep track of it. The direct argument is perhaps the big one, and that's in section 5. I'm going to hammer out some notes. I'll give you this outline just. All right, that is Kim's Myth of Non-Reductive Materialism, a real classic, a wonderful piece of metaphysics. I believe you also had some readings from this, from the IEP. Now, I was thinking of giving you some more notes on that, but you've probably got enough to worry about as is. I'm going to strongly recommend, if you've not done the reading, do the reading. If you have urgent questions about metaphysics, email me. Okay, good luck, everyone.